Travis Washington never imagined that the day his bitter tormentor would be lying helpless on the roadside would also be the day his inner fire was irrevocably ignited. What would you do if the very person who spent years trying to crush your potential suddenly found themselves at your mercy? Travis, a bright and determined student who had endured a lifetime of racial prejudice, was forced to confront the man-made injustices that had haunted him since childhood. It was a moment of reckoning, a time when destiny offered him the chance to transform humiliation into a promise of grand retribution. In the crowded AP Biology classroom at Crestwood High School, the atmosphere was as stiff as the linoleum floor underfoot. At 47 years old, Mrs. Harrington exuded an air of unyielding authority with her meticulously styled blonde hair and designer attire that seemed too lavish for a school environment. Her presence, however, was marred by a long-held contempt for students who did not fit her narrow view of excellence. Travis, one of only 3 African-American students in the advanced class, sat quietly at his desk, his dark eyes filled with both the weight of expectation and the fire of defiance. While his classmates shifted nervously in their seats, he absorbed every detail of the lesson with a passion that set him apart. A passion that, unbeknownst to him, would soon ignite an explosive chain of events. During a lecture on cellular respiration, as Mrs. Harrington delineated the Krebs cycle on the whiteboard, Travis noticed a glaring error. His heart pounded in his chest as he hesitated, then raised his hand slowly. "Yes, Mr. Johnson," he began, using the respectful title that masked his inner storm. "I believe there is a small mistake in the diagram. The conversion of pyruvate to acetyl-CoA is actually a prerequisite to the Krebs cycle, not a part of it." His voice, calm yet resolute, cut through the silence like a beacon of truth. Mrs. Harrington's face contorted into a mask of fury. "Excuse me," she snapped, her tone sharp and laced with venom. "Are you implying that I, a teacher with over 20 years of experience, am mistaken?" The room seemed to shrink under the weight of her indignation. Every word that escaped her lips dripped with condescension and a deep-seated bias. "If you think you know better than your teacher, then perhaps you'd like to enlighten us all," she continued, thrusting a marker into his trembling hand as if daring him to continue his defiance. Humiliated and cornered by the relentless barrage of anger, Travis felt every eye in the room bore into him. The sting of her words cut deeper than any physical blow, leaving him feeling small and undeserving despite the clarity of his correction. His attempt to help was twisted into an act of insolence. "I only meant to clarify a scientific fact," he whispered, his voice barely audible, but his inner resolve only hardened further. Instead of receiving guidance, he was met with a harsh command. "Out! Get out of my classroom right now!" Her words echoed like a cruel verdict, and as he gathered his books with shaking hands, the harsh phrase, "Some people need to learn their place," reverberated in his mind. The hallway outside was as cold and unyielding as the injustice he had just endured. Each step away from the classroom was a painful reminder of a system that seemed rigged against him. Yet within that crushing humiliation, a spark was lit, a promise that someday the balance of power would shift. Arriving at his modest 2-bedroom apartment, which he shared with his beloved grandmother Elaine, Travis was immediately enveloped by the familiar aroma of simmering beans and freshly baked cornbread. The home, though small by American standards, was rich with warmth and the quiet dignity of a life built on resilience and hope. "Is that you, baby?" his grandmother called from the kitchen, her voice both gentle and firm. Dressed in her nurse's scrubs, Elaine Washington's eyes conveyed years of hardship and unconditional love. One glance at Travis's tear-stained face told her everything. Sitting beside him on the worn couch, she reached out with a weathered hand, her touch conveying both comfort and determination. "What happened, Travis?" she asked softly, urging him to recount the ordeal. Through quiet sobs, he explained how Mrs. Harrington had publicly humiliated him for merely pointing out an error, her cruelty underlined by a bias that seemed to taint every word she uttered. Elaine's face grew stern as she listened, her own experiences with discrimination echoing in her gentle fury. "That woman has always had a problem with certain students," she murmured, her voice heavy with the pain of years witnessing injustice. "Your place, Travis, is not defined by the narrow minds of those who despise you. Your place is wherever your mind and hard work can take you." Her words, filled with quiet determination and motherly pride, fortified his resolve. That night, in the solitude of his small bedroom, surrounded by medical textbooks and carefully organized notes, a shrine to his dreams of one day entering the operating room, Travis allowed himself a brief moment of vulnerability. His prized possession, a genuine stethoscope gifted by his grandmother on his 15th birthday, lay beside his laptop as he reread his personal statement for the Emerging Medical Scholars Program at Johns Hopkins University. It was a scholarship meant for exceptional students from underrepresented backgrounds, a beacon of hope in a system that had repeatedly tried to dim his light. Every word of his draft pulsed with the promise of a future where he would not be confined by the prejudices of the past. As the clock ticked past 1:30 a.m., Travis's determination crystallized into a silent vow. His future was his own, and someday he would make those who had belittled him pay for their cruelty. The following morning brought a fresh wave of dread as Travis found himself waiting outside Principal Whitfield's office. The building's dark wood paneling and heavy, imposing furniture mirrored the atmosphere of judgment and old-world authority. The secretary's suspicious glance, as if he were a criminal rather than a student with a passion for truth, only deepened his sense of isolation. When his name was finally called, the door opened to reveal an intimidating scene. Principal Whitfield, with his salt and pepper hair and permanent scowl, sat behind a desk that seemed to dwarf any chance of fairness. At his side stood Mrs. Harrington, her eyes alight with barely contained hostility. "Have a seat, Mr. Washington," Principal Whitfield said in a measured tone. As Travis sat, every muscle in his body tensed in anticipation of further rebuke. The principal's words were as cold as the marble floor beneath them. "Mrs. Harrington has filed a formal complaint regarding your behavior yesterday. She describes your actions as disruptive and disrespectful." Travis, voice steady despite the tumult inside him, replied, "With all due respect, sir, I was simply correcting a scientific error. I did not raise my voice, nor was I disrespectful." His measured response, intended to clarify rather than incite, was met with a scoff from Mrs. Harrington and a dismissive wave from the principal. "The issue is not about the facts, but about your attitude," the principal declared. "You are to serve 3 days of detention and write a formal apology." Outside the oppressive confines of that office, Travis met his best friend Jamal in the bustling corridor. Jamal's eyes burned with both anger and determination as he grabbed Travis's arm. "You can't let them treat you like this," Jamal insisted in a low, urgent tone. "This isn't just about a diagram. It's about every time they try to tell you that you don't belong. You've got to stand up and show them that you are not going to be pushed around." In that charged moment, as the echoes of the principal's decree still reverberated in his ears, Travis felt a stirring resolve. It was more than a desire for justice. It was a promise of retribution so grand that those who had once mocked him would be forced to acknowledge his worth. As the day unfolded, the oppressive weight of injustice mingled with a newfound determination in Travis's heart. His grandmother's wise words, his best friend's rallying cry, and the bitter taste of humiliation coalesced into a promise. He would reclaim his dignity and transform every injustice into a stepping stone toward a brighter, bolder future. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with the potential for further pain and discrimination, yet it was also paved with the possibility of redemption and revenge. A revenge that would be so dramatic and decisive that it would leave his oppressors reeling and the onlookers in awe. In that quiet moment, with the future beckoning and the past urging him on, Travis Washington vowed that one day he would return to that very institution, not as a broken boy, but as a triumphant man who had turned every scar into a symbol of resilience. His journey was just beginning, and with every step he promised himself that he would fight for his place in the world, no matter the cost. Travis Washington told Jamal as they took their seats that this was not over, and certainly not by a long shot. Even as the teacher called the class to order, Travis's mind was already buzzing with plans of eventual triumph. He resolved that he would serve the detention, write the apology letter that was demanded of him, and play along with their petty game. But he would never allow anyone, be it Mrs. Harrington, Principal Whitfield, or any other person who sought to limit his potential, to define him. He knew deep in his heart that some battles were not worth the fight. yet his future was worth every sacrifice. That Saturday morning, as gentle raindrops tapped against the window of his modest bedroom, Travis found himself awake long before most teenagers. Instead of sleeping in, he dressed in his blue scrubs with determination and headed out for his volunteer shift at Riverside Community Hospital. The antiseptic smell of the hospital, which many would find off-putting, had come to symbolize purpose and possibility to him. As he signed in at the volunteer desk, Nurse Rodriguez greeted him warmly with a cheery, "Morning, Travis," a small light in a world that had often been dark. At the desk, a message arrived. Dr. Wilson was asking for him. Dr. Elijah Wilson, the brilliant trauma surgeon and one of the few black physicians at Riverside, had become Travis's mentor ever since they first met during a career day at school. The emergency department buzzed with controlled chaos, nurses darting between beds, doctors consulting charts, and family members waiting anxiously in the hallways. When Travis arrived at the central station, he spotted Dr. Wilson reviewing a patient file. "There he is," Dr. Wilson said with a genuine smile, his dark eyes crinkling at the corners as he greeted Travis with a relaxed, "Ready for an interesting day?" Travis replied with unwavering enthusiasm, "Always, sir." Feeling the weight of the week's injustices begin to melt away under the steady influence of purpose. For the next several hours, Travis shadowed Dr. Wilson as he learned firsthand about life-saving procedures and the intricate details of medicine. When they encountered a patient in diabetic ketoacidosis, Dr. Wilson asked, "What would you administer first in this case?" Without hesitation, Travis answered, "Fluids to address the dehydration, then insulin to bring down the glucose levels, and of course monitor the electrolytes, especially potassium." The attending nurse raised her eyebrows in approval as Dr. Wilson nodded proudly, and for a moment the hospital became a stage where Travis's keen intellect shone brightly. During a quiet lunch break in the doctor's lounge, Travis finally confided in Dr. Wilson about what had happened at school. "They kicked me out for correcting a scientific fact," he said softly, picking at his sandwich. Dr. Wilson shook his head with quiet indignation. "And the principal sided with her without even checking?" he asked, his voice heavy with disappointment. Travis sighed, admitting, "Yes, 3 days detention and an apology letter. It's like they are more concerned with their authority than with the truth." Dr. Wilson leaned forward, his tone firm yet gentle. "Travis, I have known you for 2 years now. I have seen how you interact with patients and how you approach medicine with genuine curiosity and humility. Never let this injustice make you doubt your worth or dim your light." The encouragement was like a balm to Travis's wounded spirit, even as he confessed his inner fear of having to keep his head down and not stand up for what was right. "The day you stop asking questions is the day you stop growing," Dr. Wilson said, his words echoing deep within him. After lunch, as they returned to the ER, Travis felt himself standing a little taller. The rest of his shift passed quickly, filled with moments where he assisted in complex cases that demanded every bit of his focus and knowledge. At one point, an attending physician mistakenly assumed he was a full-fledged medical student rather than a high school volunteer. Dr. Wilson just smiled knowingly and said to another doctor, "Mark my words, that young man is destined to change lives." Those words filled Travis with pride and a renewed sense of purpose. Later that week, Monday morning arrived with a bitter chill that seemed to mirror the cruelty he had experienced at school. After spending Sunday evening drafting, redrafting, and perfecting the apology letter to Mrs. Harrington, Travis entered the AP biology classroom with his head held high. With deliberate calm, he walked straight to Mrs. Harrington's desk and placed the sealed envelope beside her gradebook. "Thank you, Mr. Washington," she said flatly, barely glancing up, and then added, "Please take your seat." That day, the lesson focused on genetic inheritance patterns. Travis took meticulous notes and raised his hand only once to ask a clarifying question about incomplete dominance, only to have his hand ignored by Mrs. Harrington while she praised similar answers from 2 white girls sitting in the front row. When one of the girls, Melissa, answered, she was met with a bright smile and affirmations from Mrs. Harrington. The disparity was glaring, and as his best friend Jamal scribbled a note saying, "This is straight-up discrimination, you seeing this?" The injustice stung even more deeply. Throughout the week the pattern continued. In lab assignments, Mrs. Harrington scrutinized Travis's work with an almost malicious attention to detail, picking apart minor errors that she conveniently overlooked in other students' projects. When teams presented their findings, she interrupted Travis repeatedly while offering praise for less rigorous presentations from other groups. The final straw came during Friday's lab practical, where the assignment was to identify stages of mitosis using microscope slides. Travis had prepared extensively, knowing that every correct observation brought him one step closer to his dream. As he methodically identified each stage, documenting his observations with precision, Mrs. Harrington's expression remained suspicious and cold. When she stopped at his station and pointed at his worksheet, saying, "You have identified this as telophase," Travis replied confidently, "Yes, ma'am, you can clearly see the nuclear envelopes reforming and the chromosomes decondensing." But she shook her head and declared it to be late anaphase. With the entire lab silent, Travis calmly insisted, "I am quite certain it is telophase." His voice wavered only slightly as he offered evidence, but Mrs. Harrington cut him off, declaring, "Perhaps if you spent more time studying instead of questioning your teachers, your grades wouldn't be suffering." Her words, laced with disdain, reverberated in the silent room, and as Travis stared in disbelief, he knew that his excellence in the class was being deliberately undermined by her biased cruelty. After class, while examining the microscope slide once more to confirm his correct identification, Travis photographed it as evidence, his hands trembling with a mix of anger and deep-seated frustration. Jamal found him in the lab, quietly asking, "You okay, man?" To which Travis answered bitterly, "No, she marked me wrong when I was right again." Jamal urged him to report her, insisting that this had gone too far, but Travis's weary laugh betrayed his resignation. "To who? Principal Whitfield already thinks I have an attitude problem." As he gathered his materials for the next class, he overheard a whispered conversation between two girls. One remarked, "It's so weird how Mrs. Harrington treats him. He is literally the smartest person in class, yet she acts like he's stupid." Another added, "I heard she makes a point of doing this every year, and usually it's the black kids." The comment, though soft, struck Travis like a physical blow, confirming the harsh discrimination he had long suspected. Despite the constant humiliation and unfair treatment, Travis clung to his determination. With a scholarship application deadline looming in 3 months, he needed strong recommendations, excellent grades, and a spotless disciplinary record. That evening, as he prepared for another volunteer shift at the hospital, Travis made a solemn decision. He would continue to excel in Mrs. Harrington's class, meticulously document every instance of unfair treatment, and seek out another teacher whose support could bolster his scholarship applications. He would not let one prejudiced woman define his destiny. 2 weeks later, as storm clouds gathered over the city and thunder rumbled in the distance, Travis wrapped up his evening shift at the hospital. He said goodbye to the nursing staff and headed to the parking lot with a heavy heart. His grandmother had finally managed to save enough money to buy him a used Honda Civic, a practical necessity for his late hospital shifts when the buses no longer ran. Dr. Wilson's voice echoed in his ear as they walked to their cars. "Drive safe, Travis. The weather report says it's going to get nasty out there." Checking his phone for the quickest route home, Travis promised, "Will do." As rain began to fall in heavy sheets, he navigated the winding road through a wooded area that separated the hospital from his neighborhood. The windshield wipers worked furiously, clearing the downpour and reducing visibility to just a few yards ahead. At one particularly sharp curve, Travis noticed something unusual. Fresh tire marks veered off the road, still visible despite the relentless rain. Slowing to a cautious crawl, he peered through the rain-slicked windows and saw, partially hidden by foliage and tilted precariously down an embankment, a silver BMW, with its front end crumpled in a way that suggested a recent accident. The sight sent a chill down his spine as he wondered what could have caused such destruction. In that moment, as the storm raged and the road lay treacherous before him, Travis felt an unsettling mix of fear and grim determination. It was as if the violent weather mirrored the storm of injustice he had endured. A storm that one day he would use to reclaim his dignity in a way that would leave his oppressors utterly astonished. Travis Washington's heart pounded as his used Honda Civic skidded off the rain-soaked road and nearly collided with a battered car crumpled against a sturdy oak. He pulled over immediately, his pulse racing as he gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. Without hesitation, he grabbed his emergency flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the torrential downpour. Every raindrop felt like a drumbeat against his skin as he approached the wrecked vehicle, his mind swirling with memories of Mrs. Harrington's cutting words and relentless discrimination. For years, she had humiliated him in class, dismissing his keen observations and belittling him because of his skin color. But fate now had twisted the knife in the most unexpected way. As he circled the car, Travis called out softly, "Hello, is anyone in there? Do you need help?" His voice was steady, despite the chaotic storm around him. Peering through the rain-slicked window, he saw a figure slumped over the steering wheel. The deployed airbag, now deflated and discarded like remnants of her former authority, revealed the unmistakable silhouette of Mrs. Harrington, his former tormentor. Unconscious and bleeding from a gash on her forehead, for one terrible moment Travis was paralyzed by the cruel irony. The woman who had once tried to crush his spirit now lay helpless before him, and in that instant the desire for revenge tangled with a deep sense of responsibility. His inner turmoil threatened to overwhelm him with thoughts of payback for all the humiliation he had suffered. Yet his training under Dr. Wilson surged forward. Remembering every lesson on emergency care, Travis knew that regardless of past wrongs, a life in peril demanded his full attention. He quickly assessed the situation. Mrs. Harrington's right arm lay at an odd angle, likely broken, and her head wound was bleeding heavily. With practiced caution, he discovered that the driver's side door was blocked by a fallen branch, while the passenger door stood ajar. He carefully pulled it open, the car shifting dangerously as he entered. "Mrs. Harrington, it's Travis Washington," he said loudly, his voice carrying over the roar of the storm. "I'm here to help you." "Please stay very still." A low moan escaped her lips as she stirred, and the sight of her vulnerability struck him deeply. Every instinct told him that moving her was risky, but leaving her in the unstable vehicle was far more dangerous. With painstaking care, Travis unbuckled her seatbelt and slowly, inch by inch, maneuvered her towards safety. The car lurched again, and his heart leapt into his throat, but he pressed on, recalling his grandmother's wise words that one must do what is right regardless of past grievances. Once he had managed to pull her onto the muddy embankment, he immediately retrieved emergency reflectors from his trunk and set them along the slick road to signal for help. For nearly 40 agonizing minutes, Travis stayed by her side in the pouring rain, tending to her wounds and monitoring her condition, until headlights finally emerged in the distance, promising rescue. In that moment, despite the years of pain inflicted by a racist bully, Travis realized that true strength lies in rising above bitterness and extending compassion, even when the scars run deep. Travis Washington's heart still pounded from the night's ordeal as he stood by the hospital bed in the dimly lit recovery room. "Most people would have kept driving," he said simply, his voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Mrs. Harrington, once the embodiment of haughty cruelty and discrimination, lay there battered and humbled by fate. After a long, thoughtful pause, she met his gaze with a sincerity that surprised even her. "No, you are not like most people," she finally admitted, her tone trembling with regret. "Dr. Wilson told me that you likely saved my life that night. Not many trained professionals would have handled it as well as you did." Her voice was soft, laden with an apology that cut through years of unyielding prejudice. Travis shifted uncomfortably, his mind a whirlwind of conflicted emotions. "I volunteer here, Mom. I've picked up a few things," he replied modestly. "More than a few, it seems," she murmured as she attempted to adjust her position and winced in pain. "He told me everything. About your volunteer work, your knowledge, about how you're one of the most promising medical talents he's seen in 30 years of teaching." Her confession, delivered with every ounce of vulnerability she could muster, left Travis momentarily speechless. "I was wrong about you, Travis," she continued, each word seeming to cost her dearly. "I was completely wrong, and I'm ashamed." Her admission carried the weight of years steeped in bias and arrogance. Before Travis could fully process her transformation, A nurse entered to check her vitals, urging that she needed rest. As he moved toward the door, she softly called, "Thank you, truly. We'll talk more when I'm back." Outside the recovery area, Dr. Wilson waited in the corridor, remarking, "Quite a night, wasn't it?" His mentor's words carried a note of pride and quiet respect, and Travis managed a nod, still absorbing the unexpected turn of events. 2 weeks later, the halls of Westridge High buzzed with whispered rumors of Travis's heroics. Stories swirled that he had performed an emergency procedure on the roadside using nothing more than a pocket knife and dental floss. A tale that, though exaggerated, only amplified the admiration his peers felt. On the third day, as he walked to class with his friend Jamal, he heard playful teasing. "Man, you're like a celebrity now. I heard you carried Mrs. Harrington 3 miles through the woods on your back." Travis only shook his head, uncomfortable with the attention yet buoyed by the knowledge that justice was finally, if belatedly, being served. Later that day, Principal Whitfield summoned him to his office. The normally stern administrator wore a warm smile as he recounted Travis's impeccable academic record, perfect attendance, and dedicated volunteer work. "And now apparently you saved the life of one of our teachers," he said, his tone laced with genuine admiration. With a dramatic flourish, the principal tore a disciplinary form in half and announced that Mrs. Harrington had withdrawn her complaint. "She even requested a review of her own grading discrepancies," he explained. Then, in front of the entire class, Mrs. Harrington returned, not as the callous figure of the past, but as a humbled mentor. Standing before the students with genuine remorse, she declared, "I have been unjustly critical of Travis. I allowed my biases to cloud my judgment. Today, I apologize publicly and promise to never let prejudice stand in the way of recognizing true talent again." Her voice wavered as she continued, "Travis, I owe you an apology and a heartfelt thank you. I have already spoken with the admissions director at Johns Hopkins, and I will be honored to write your recommendation letter." As the classroom burst into awed silence, Travis felt the tide of his fate shift at last, the scars of discrimination slowly healing beneath the warmth of genuine respect and newfound opportunity. In the front row, Travis Washington's grandmother dabbed her eyes with a tissue, while Dr. Wilson sat beside her, the same Dr. Wilson who had recently helped him secure a coveted spot in the Johns Hopkins summer medical program. "Last week I received some news," Travis announced with a broad, genuine smile that reflected years of hard-fought battles. "I've been awarded the full scholarship to Johns Hopkins University that I've been working so tirelessly toward." Applause erupted in the room, and none clapped louder than Mrs. Harrington, the very woman who had once treated him with disdain and cruelty. Her recommendation letter was so glowing that the admissions committee mentioned it specifically in his acceptance package. In that moment, the tables had turned in a way that left every onlooker in stunned disbelief. After the presentation, as the room slowly filled with congratulatory whispers and gentle claps, Mrs. Harrington approached Travis while he gathered his notes. "That was excellent," she said warmly, her tone markedly different from the harshness he remembered. "You are going to inspire so many of these kids." Travis's heart softened at her sincere words, but he also remembered every unjust remark and every biased correction that had once cut him deeply. "Thank you," he replied modestly. In the days that followed, the school buzzed with whispers of his heroic deeds, not just for saving a life during that harrowing storm, but for overcoming years of systemic prejudice. The news spread like wildfire, transforming him from a quiet, brilliant student into a symbol of justice and resilience. At the annual high school preview day, Travis stood at the podium in the school auditorium, his grandmother and Dr. Wilson in attendance. The auditorium filled with middle school students, all eager to hear his story of triumph over adversity. "When life puts you at a crossroads, you have a choice," he began in a clear, steady voice that resonated with authority and compassion. "What makes a hero is not some superpower, but the strength to choose compassion over revenge, even when it would be easier to seek retribution." His words, laced with the wisdom of someone who had suffered the sting of racial discrimination and academic injustice, moved every listener. After the presentation, Mrs. Harrington approached him again, her posture humble and her eyes soft. "I've been teaching for 25 years, but you, Travis, have taught me more than I ever taught you," she admitted quietly. I've been wrong, and I am ashamed of the harshness and bias I once showed. I have been working on a mentorship program that connects our students with medical professionals, and I would be honored if you would speak to the committee." Travis looked at her with cautious hope. "I would be honored as well," he said sincerely. As they walked together toward the exit, the golden spring sunshine bathed the school grounds and symbolized a new beginning, one where old prejudices were left behind and true character shone through. Standing there amid a diverse tapestry of hopeful faces, Travis's journey from being ridiculed and held back by systemic racism to emerging as a celebrated young hero served as a stirring reminder that every day we have the chance to either judge or understand. Which will you choose?